Welcome to Chapter 12, Module 1, Differential Analysis, the key to decision making. You know, making decisions is one of the basic functions of a manager. To be successful in decision making, managers must be able to tell the difference between relevant and irrelevant data, and be able to correctly use irrelevant data in analyzing alternatives. We'll discuss how to develop these skills by illustrating their use in a wide range of decision-making situations. You all set, Sketch?
I'm ready, Freddy.
Don't you mean Smudge?
Whatever.
Let's start with a couple of terms: relevant and irrelevant costs.
Costs that differ between alternatives are called relevant cost. Benefits that differ between alternatives are called relevant benefits.
In decision making, we identify and consider the relevant costs and we ignore the irrelevant costs.
An avoidable cost is a cost that can be eliminated by considering one alternative over another. Avoidable costs are always relevant costs. Unavoidable costs are going to happen no matter what decision is made, so they are irrelevant costs.
There are two broad categories of costs that are never relevant in any decision. Sunk cost is a cost that has already been incurred and can't be avoided regardless of what a manager decides to do. And a future cost does not differ between alternatives, and that's never relevant in a decision. Our decision-making process has two steps. First, we eliminate costs and benefits that do not differ between alternatives. These are irrelevant costs and usually consist of sunk costs and future costs, again, that don't differ between the two alternatives.
Second, we use the remaining costs and benefits that do differ between alternatives in making the decision. These are differential or avoidable costs.
Costs that are relevant in one decision situation may not be relevant in another context. So we need to examine the data at hand and isolate the relevant costs. Including irrelevant costs in our decision process may cause us to reach a faulty conclusion. So Cynthia is considering visiting her friend in New York. She can drive or take the train. By car, it's 230 miles to her friend's apartment, and she's trying to decide which alternative is less expensive and has gathered the following information. Pause the video and take a few minutes and see if you can identify which of these costs are relevant costs out of all the costs that are listed. Sketch, do you think the straight line depreciation is a relevant cost to deciding if Cynthia takes the train or drives to New York?
I don't think so, because the depreciation is the same whether we take the car or ride the train.
That's right. How about the cost of gasoline?
Sure. We have gas costs if we drive. We don't if we take the train, so that cost would be relevant.
And what about the annual cost of auto insurance and the license? Relevant or not?
Those have to be not relevant, because she is going to have those whether she takes the train or drives.
And the maintenance and repair cost? Remember, this is an annual amount based on the mileage that she drives.
In that case, they would have to be relevant. The more miles driven, the higher the maintenance cost.
What about the parking fees at the school in Boston?
She is going to have those regardless of the trip to New York, or how she is going to get there. So those costs are not relevant.
Good job. How about these additional costs that she identified? Which ones of these are relevant? Pause the video and take a few minutes and identify those costs that you think are relevant to the decision. Sketch, what about the reduction in the resale value of the car?
I think that would be relevant. The more miles she drives, the greater the reduction in resale value.
Sure, and the round-trip train fare?
That's easy. Of course. If she drives, she doesn't have that cost.
How about the benefit of relaxing on the train? It's an intangible benefit, kind of hard to quantify, but she'd still consider it.
Sure. She only gets that if she takes the train.
And the cost of putting the dog in the kennel?
I don't think so. She would have that cost whether she drove or took the train.
That's right. And the benefits and hassles of having a car in New York, as well as the cost of parking in New York?
All those would be relevant. She would not have those if she took the train.
Good. Now let's put all this together. By listing out the relevant costs that we can measure, we get the cost to drive of $137.86.
And the cost to take the train of $104.
From a financial standpoint, Cynthia would be better off taking the train, but she may decide, based on those unmeasurable qualitative factors, to drive. Let's look at another example. We have the following information for a company who's considering a new labor-saving machine that rents for $3,000 per year. We have financial results without the machine and with it, and we're trying to decide if we should get the machine.
One approach is to compare the two contribution income statements to see what the difference is between the two.
The difference between the two income statements is $12,000. That suggests we'd be better off with the new machine. But a quicker and easier approach would be to just consider the relevant costs and benefits, or the costs and benefits that are different between the two alternatives.
The labor costs decrease by $15,000, and the rent increases by $3,000, giving us the same cost savings as we calculated before, $12,000.
We prefer to use the differential approach because, for one, it's usually hard to get all the information to prepare the detailed statements of both alternatives.
Also, by mingling irrelevant costs with relevant costs, we might cause confusion and distract attention away from what is really important.
Next up, let's talk about how to prepare an analysis showing whether a product line or other business segment should be added or dropped. One of the more difficult decisions managers make is whether to add or drop a business segment. In the final analysis, a decision to drop a segment or add a new one is going to come down to the impact on net operating income. We ask ourselves, will dropping a division result in an increase in operating income?
In order to assess this, we need to carefully analyze cost and how they will behave if we close the division.
For an example, let's look at Lovell Company, who has a division that makes digital watches. Due to the declining popularity of digital watches, the watch line's not reported a profit for a number of years. So the company is trying to decide if they should close the division. To make this decision, Lovell will compare the contribution margin that would be lost to the costs that would be avoided if they drop the line. If profits increase, then they should drop the line. This would only happen if the fixed cost savings exceed the lost contribution margin. So here are Lovell's financial results for their digital watch division.
Looks like things aren't going so well. That's a $100,000 loss.
So it seems obvious that they should close a division, but we need to look a little closer. We figure out that the fixed general factory overhead and the fixed general administrative expenses don't go away if we drop the watch line. Instead, these costs just get allocated to another product line.
The equipment that is used doesn't have any market value or alternative use. So even if we close the product line, we will still have the depreciation cost.
And we can break the factory lease. So, should we retain the digital watch line or drop it? We start with our contribution margin, which goes away if we discontinue the product line. Then we identify the fixed costs that also go away.
Let's see. The general factory overhead and the general administrative expenses just get reallocated, so those costs are not avoided. We wouldn't include them in our decision.
Good. What else?
The line manager salary could be avoided by cutting that position.
Okay. And?
The depreciation would not be avoided. We can't sell the machines or use them elsewhere, so that cost stays.
That's right. Keep going.
The advertising and rent both would go away, so we would include those.
That's right. We add up those costs and subtract from our lost contribution margin, and we can see that if we close down the product line, we would actually lose $40,000 more than if we kept the product line open. Notice the fixed costs that can be avoided are less than the contribution margin that we would lose. So we're worse off if we shut down the product line. We could also have laid out the two income statements side by side and compared them. Let's see what that would look like. If the digital watch line is dropped, the company loses $300,000 in contribution margin.
The general factory overhead would be the same under both alternatives, so it is irrelevant to the decision.
The salary of the product manager would disappear, so it is relevant to the decision.
The depreciation is a sunk cost. The equipment has no resale value or alternative use, so we can't get rid of it or use it elsewhere. So the equipment and the depreciation associated with it are irrelevant to the decision.
We compare the contribution income that we would lose to the fixed costs that are avoidable, and we see that we would lose $40,000 if we close the division. The lost contribution income is $40,000 greater than the avoidable costs. That's all for Chapter 12, Module 1. See you soon.